Hi, Bob Gruen, New York rock and roll photographer here today for Boomerocity.com. And today I'd like to talk about Chrissie Hynde, one of the great rock and rollers of our time. And I first met Chrissie, I think it was 1977. I'd gone over to Johnny Thunder's house, and she came by with Don Les. She was, I think, staying with Don at the time. And Don came over to drop something off for the band, and Johnny invited the three of us to come along with him. He had a bus, and he was going for a couple of dates out in England, and he said that he would pay for our hotel room. So we looked at each other and said, sure, why not? And we decided to go along. And I remember taking a bus ride up to the countryside. I think there was a couple other bands like Susie and the Banshees, and maybe it was Gen X. There was some young bands that were coming along with Johnny, young English bands. And we got there, and they had a sound check. It was kind of a cold, dismal English, empty dance hall. And we were in the dressing room, and I remember, Jerry Nolan, I think, was getting high, and Chrissie and I were really kind of turned off by that whole scene of him getting high in front of these young kids. And so we went back in the alley in the back, and we were sharing a sip of cognac and talking about, what was going on. And Chrissie was a journalist at the time. She was writing, I think, for the NME, and she wasn't in a band yet, but I remember her grousing about, how these bands were so lame and the guys were just getting stoned, and she could do a much better job. And I remember saying, well, why don't you? And I don't know, it was my encouragement, but when I came back a year later, Chrissie had a band. I remember calling her, and she invited me down. She was auditioning drummers, and I remember some red-haired Scottish guy kind of destroying a drum set, and her and Jim Farnham were there, and they just got, a little frustrated because there were so many different drummers. So they decided to call it a night, and actually took me to see The Damned, which was one of the first really big punk shows that I saw in England, where people were moshing, where they were literally jumping on top of each other, and I had never seen that before, where kids were coming out of the audience up onto the stage and then jumping back in on top of everybody else. And actually at the end of the set, The Damned started throwing the roadies on, and then the roadies threw the band in the audience, and then somebody smashed the guitar, and then the piano player actually smashed the whole piano down into little pieces and threw them in the audience. It was quite a night, And Chrissie was right in the middle of that whole scene. And I remember she started working with her band after that. She got a drummer, and a great drummer, Martin Chambers. Fantastic drummer, still with her today. But she started recording and making some records. When I came back in 1979, she was actually one of the headliners at the concert for Cambodia. It was a benefit fundraiser, 3 days at Hammerstein Odeon. And she was up there with bands like Wings and Queen and Elvis Costello and the Who and the Clash and the Pretenders on the same bill. So that was a pretty quick rise. But of course, she was writing such great songs, Brass in Pocket, and she just had one hit after another. I remember at one point, I think it was later in the 80s, I heard a song, a reggae song, that was kind of a duet of a reggae version of I Got You Babe, and I couldn't imagine who had done that. And I went and looked it up, and it turned out that Chrissie Hynde had done a duet with UB40. That's one of the better reggae songs to come out of England during that time. You should look it up on YouTube. It's fantastic. There's a nice video of Chrissie with UB40. Anyway, also about Chrissie, besides being a musician, she's very much a vegetarian. She opened her own vegetarian restaurant in Akron, Ohio, where she was originally from. I actually ate there one time. It's a pretty good restaurant. You should try it out. But she's very much an anti-meat, anti-leather activist. She'll go into a store and destroy the displays and get arrested for it, because she's a firm believer in not killing animals and not making cheap leather out of animals, and basically eating a healthy vegetarian diet. So look that up, check out Chrissie's diet, it might be good for you. Anyways, Chrissie's still playing today. It's 40 years later, and she's still as good as she ever was, maybe better, because she's been playing for 40 years. She learned how to do it. I recently saw that she played at Royal Albert Hall in London, a big giant place, and she sang only Bob Dylan songs. I caught the streaming version online, and it was just really good, much better than I expected, because I like Chrissie singing her songs. I didn't know how it would come off if she was singing Bob Dylan, but apparently she's met Bob a couple of times, and she's a big fan, and that show of Chrissie singing Bob Dylan is classic, a really great show. So anyway, that's me for today, and I hope you enjoy Chrissie Hynde. Go play her records and look at my pictures. You can see more of my pictures of Chrissie on my website, bobgruen.com. Thanks for having me.